The crystal palace of Emperor Zixthal stretched across the sky like a frozen storm. Its walls caught the light of 3 suns and threw it back in colors that had no names. From his throne room, the Emperor could see 847 worlds spinning in the darkness of space. Each one belonged to him. The Vorthic Empire was perfect. Every planet ran exactly as it should. Every species knew their place. Every law was followed without question. The Emperor had spent 3,000 years making it this way. He was proud of what he had built, but lately, something bothered him. Something small and strange that he could not understand. The humans' Earth had fallen to his armies 2 years ago. The humans had fought bravely, but their weapons were like toys compared to Vorthic technology. Their ships moved slow as insects. Their cities crumbled in days. The war was over before it really began. Most conquered species became slaves or soldiers. But humans were different. They were too weak to fight and too emotional to think clearly. The Vorthic scientists studied them and decided humans were only good for simple work. Cleaning, cooking, carrying things. Their brains were too small for anything important. So humans became servants in the palace. They scrubbed floors and washed dishes and stayed quiet. This made sense to everyone. Everyone except the Emperor. He watched them sometimes. The humans moved differently than other servants. They hummed while they worked. They smiled at each other. They seemed almost happy. This made no sense at all. How could they be happy? They had lost everything. Their world was gone. Their freedom was gone. They cleaned toilets for alien masters who saw them as barely better than animals. Any thinking creature should be miserable, but the humans were not miserable. Not all of them, anyway, especially the child. Her name was Elena. She was 8 years old, small even for a human, with dark hair that fell over her eyes when she worked. She lived in the servants' quarters with her mother, Mira. Mira was one of the palace maids. She worked 16 hours every day and never complained. Elena worked too. Human children had to earn their keep, according to palace rules. She dusted furniture and swept hallways and polished metal until it shone. But she did something else that puzzled the Emperor. She sang, not loudly, just little songs under her breath. Songs from Earth her mother had told the guards when they asked. Songs about sunshine and rain and oceans that Elena had never seen but somehow remembered. The Emperor had ruled 1,000 different species. He had seen every type of creature the galaxy had to offer. But he had never seen anything like Elena. She drew pictures too. The guards threw away her drawings when they found them. But Elena kept making more. She used burned sticks from the kitchen fires and drew on pieces of thrown-away cloth. The pictures showed strange things: trees, birds, people holding hands, things that did not exist in the Crystal Palace. Yesterday, the Emperor had watched Elena through the security cameras. She was cleaning the lower halls when she found an injured palace moth. The creature was dying, one wing torn and useless. Any sensible person would have thrown it away. Elena picked it up instead. She carried it to a sunny window and gave it drops of sugar water from her own food ration. She talked to it in soft words. She told it stories until it died peacefully in her small hands. Then she cried. She cried for a bug. A worthless insect that lived for 3 days and served no purpose. She cried like it mattered. The Emperor had stared at the screen for a long time after that. His advisors said it was simple stupidity. Humans were too primitive to understand reality, they explained. The child's brain had not developed properly. She lived in fantasies because the truth was too hard for her weak mind to accept. But the Emperor was not so sure. He was old. Older than most mountains. In his long life, he had conquered everything worth conquering. He had built an empire that would last forever. He had achieved perfect order across the stars. So why did he feel empty? The Vorthok had evolved beyond emotion long ago. Feelings were messy and inefficient. Love was weakness. Joy was a waste of energy. His people had removed these things from themselves through careful breeding and mental training. They were better for it, stronger, smarter, perfect. But watching Elena, the Emperor wondered if they had removed something important too. His throne room was vast and quiet. Golden walls reached up into darkness. The floor was made of polished stone that reflected everything like still water. At the center sat his throne, carved from a single black crystal that had taken 100 years to grow. The Emperor spent most days here, making decisions that affected billions of lives. He decided who lived and who died, which planets would prosper and which would burn, what laws would govern the galaxy. But today, he found himself thinking about a human child who cried over dead bugs. His personal guard, Captain Vexstar, stood at attention beside the throne. The captain was a perfect Vorthok warrior, strong, intelligent, completely loyal, and utterly without mercy. "My lord," the captain said, "the human work assignments are ready for your approval." The Emperor looked at the datapad. Hundreds of names. Humans assigned to clean, cook, and serve. Their lives reduced to simple tasks and numbers. He found Elena's name on the list. Assignment: throne room cleaning, daily maintenance. "My lord?" the captain asked when the Emperor did not respond. "I want to understand them," the Emperor said quietly. "Understand what, my lord?" "The humans. What makes them different?" The captain's face showed confusion. "They are inferior, my lord. There is nothing to understand." But the Emperor was not satisfied with that answer anymore. He made a decision. "Tomorrow I will conduct an experiment," he announced. "I want to observe human behavior when they believe they are unwatched, my lord. Prepare the throne room. Tomorrow morning I will appear to sleep. Let the humans enter for their duties as normal, but record everything. I want to see what they do when they think no one is looking." The captain bowed low. "As you command, my lord." The Emperor turned back to his endless view of the stars. Somewhere among those lights was Earth, a small blue world that had given birth to creatures who sang while they worked and cried over dying insects. Tomorrow, he would learn their secret. The morning came cold and gray. 3 suns hung in the alien sky like distant jewels, but their light felt harsh through the crystal walls. Emperor Zixthal stood in his private chambers, preparing for his experiment. He had not slept. Vorthok needed very little sleep anyway, and his mind had been too busy with questions. What would the humans do when they thought he was helpless? Would they steal from him? Try to hurt him? Run away? His advisors all agreed on what would happen. "They will show their true nature," Captain Vexstar had said the night before. "Animals always do when they think the predator is weak." The Emperor hoped his advisors were wrong. But 3,000 years of ruling had taught him to expect the worst from conquered peoples. His meditation robes were deep blue, the color of dead stars. He pulled them tight around his tall frame and walked to the throne room. The massive doors closed behind him with a sound like thunder. The throne room was empty now. Just him in the silence and the cold light from above. Hidden cameras watched from every corner. Recording devices measured every breath. If a dust mote moved, the sensors would track it. The Emperor sat on his throne and began the old meditation techniques. His breathing slowed. His heartbeat dropped to almost nothing. His body temperature fell until he felt like carved ice. To any observer, he would look dead, or close to it. But inside his mind, he remained fully awake and aware. This was an ancient Vorthok skill. Warriors used it to hide from enemies. Scholars used it to think without distraction. The Emperor had mastered it centuries ago, but had not used it in decades. There had been no need. Now, he lay still as stone in his throne, waiting. The first hour passed in silence. Then he heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Multiple sets of feet. The cleaning crew was arriving. Through his enhanced hearing, he caught fragments of conversation. Extra careful today. Emperor looked tired yesterday. Told Elena to start with the throne room. Elena, the child, would be first. Good. The Emperor wanted to observe her most of all. The great doors opened with their usual grinding sound. Small footsteps entered the vast space. The Emperor could smell the cleaning supplies. Soap and polish and the metal scent of scrubbing tools. The footsteps stopped. Through his closed eyelids, the Emperor sensed movement. Someone was standing near his throne, not moving, just watching. He knew it was Elena even before she spoke. Your Majesty? Her voice was tiny in the huge room. Are you all right? She waited for an answer that would not come. The Emperor forced himself to remain perfectly still. His experiment had begun. Elena moved closer. Her footsteps were so light he could barely hear them. She was standing right next to his throne now, close enough to touch him, close enough to hurt him if she wanted. Any moment now she would show her true nature. She would steal something, try to wake him roughly, maybe call for the guards and claim she had found him dead. Hoping for a reward, the Emperor waited for proof that humans were just clever animals, no different from any other species he had conquered. But Elena did something else entirely. She sat down, right there on the cold stone floor beside his throne. Elena sat cross-legged, like she was attending a lesson. The Emperor could hear her setting down her cleaning supplies with careful, quiet movements. Then she began to talk. You look really tired, she said softly. Mom says ruling must be hard work. She says you have to take care of everybody in the whole galaxy. That sounds scary. I can barely take care of my one small room. The Emperor lay motionless, but inside his mind, confusion grew. This was not what his advisors had predicted. I'm supposed to clean in here, Elena continued, but I don't want to wake you up. You need your rest. Everyone deserves good sleep. She was quiet for a moment. Then she started talking again, her voice even softer than before. Mom told me about Earth once. She said we used to have these big blue oceans everywhere, and fish that swam in them like birds in the sky. I never saw the oceans, but I dream about them sometimes. I think you might like them too. The water was always moving, but it made people feel calm somehow. The Emperor found himself listening despite himself. Elena's voice had a strange quality. Not the fear he expected from a human child talking to her alien master. Just warmth. And we had rain, Elena went on. Mom says rain was like the sky crying, but good crying. Happy crying. It made flowers grow. I wish it would rain here sometimes. The crystal walls are pretty, but they're so hard. Rain would make them soft. She was telling him stories, sitting beside his throne, thinking he was asleep, and telling him stories about a world he had destroyed. This made no sense at all. I know you conquered us, Elena said quietly. The grown-ups whisper about the war when they think I'm not listening. They say terrible things happened. But you know what? I think maybe you were just lonely. The Emperor's eyes wanted to snap open, but he forced them to stay closed. Lonely? Him? The ruler of 847 worlds? How could a human child possibly think? I get lonely too sometimes, Elena continued. Even with Mom here. Sometimes I miss people I never met. Does that make sense? I miss the people who used to live on Earth before the war. I miss the animals and the trees and the rain. I miss things I never had. She was quiet again. The Emperor heard her moving around, picking up her cleaning tools. She was going to start working now. The strange moment would end, and she would become just another servant doing her job. But first, Elena did something that made the Emperor's ancient heart skip a beat. "You look cold," she whispered. He felt something soft and warm settle over his legs. Something that smelled like soap and a little bit like tears. Elena had covered him with something. "Everyone deserves to feel safe when they sleep," she said. "Even emperors." Then her footsteps moved away, and the quiet sounds of cleaning began. Elena hummed as she worked, the same soft tune he had heard her sing before. But now she was humming it for him. To keep him company. To make sure he did not feel alone in his sleep. The Emperor lay perfectly still under Elena's gift. And for the first time in 1,000 years, he did not know what to think. His experiment was supposed to prove that humans were just clever animals. Instead, he was learning something else entirely. Something that frightened him more than any army ever had. The Emperor lay frozen under Elena's gift, his mind racing while his body remained still as death. The soft fabric covering his legs was warm and smelled of soap and something else. Something he could not name. Through his enhanced senses, he analyzed the material. Cotton blend, roughly woven. Old and worn thin from many washings. By galactic standards, it was worthless. Barely fit for cleaning rags, but Elena had given it to him freely. She was still humming as she worked, that same gentle melody from Earth. The sound echoed strangely in the vast throne room, filling spaces that had known only silence for centuries. Her footsteps moved in a careful pattern around his throne, dusting and polishing with quiet efficiency. The Emperor found himself listening to her breathing. It was steady and calm. She showed no fear, no nervousness at being alone with the most powerful being in the galaxy. How was that possible? Even his own guards felt fear in his presence. "There," Elena said softly to herself. "That crystal looks much better now." She was talking to the room, the Emperor realized. Making conversation with empty air because silence felt wrong to her. This was another human trait that puzzled him. Vorthik worked in perfect quiet. Sound was inefficient. But Elena filled the silence with words and songs, like she was sharing the space with friends. "I wish you could see Earth in your dreams," she said. And the Emperor knew she was talking to him again. "Mom says dreams can take you anywhere, even to places that don't exist anymore." The child believed he was sleeping. She thought she was, helping him have better dreams by talking about beautiful things. The Emperor had not dreamed in over 1,000 years. Vorthik's sleep was efficient and empty. But Elena wanted to give him something better. She moved closer to his throne again. The Emperor sensed her small presence nearby, felt the warmth of her body in the cold room. "You have sad eyes," Elena whispered. "Even when they're closed, they look sad. I noticed that before. When you sit on your throne during the day, you always look like something hurts inside." The Emperor's carefully controlled breathing almost stuttered. How could a human child see things that his own advisors missed? He was the perfect Vorthik ruler. Strong, emotionless, in complete control. He showed no weakness, no pain, no doubt. But Elena saw sadness in his eyes. "Mom says everyone needs someone to care about them," Elena continued. "Even grown-ups. Even important people. Maybe especially important people, because they have to be strong all the time. That must get tired." She was quiet for a moment, and the Emperor heard her moving around the throne. Cleaning, always cleaning, but also watching over him like a guard. Like she was protecting his sleep. "I don't remember my dad," Elena said suddenly. "He died in the war. Mom told me he was brave and kind and funny. She said he used to sing to me when I was really little. I wish I could remember that." The Emperor felt something twist in his chest, an unfamiliar sensation. Elena's father had died fighting against him. The Emperor's armies had killed this child's father, and now she was caring for his sleep. "But you know what?" Elena went on. "I think maybe caring for someone is like remembering them. When you take care of people, you keep the love alive. even when the people are gone. This was impossible. No conquered species talked this way. They hated their conquerors. They plotted revenge. They waited for chances to strike back. They did not sit beside enemy thrones and speak of love. But Elena was different. All humans seemed different, but Elena most of all. "I brought you something," she said, and the Emperor heard rustling sounds. "I wasn't supposed to, but I thought you might like it." More movement. Something small being placed near his throne. "It's a drawing," Elena explained. "I drew it yesterday with charcoal from the kitchen. It's not very good, but it shows Earth. The way Mom described it to me. Blue oceans and green trees and white clouds. I thought maybe if you saw it in your dreams, you'd understand why people loved it so much." She had drawn him a picture of the world he had destroyed. Not to make him feel guilty, but to share something beautiful with him. To help him understand what his war had taken away. The Emperor's throat felt tight. Another impossible sensation. "I know you're probably not actually dreaming," Elena added. "Mom says important people sleep differently. But maybe you can feel that someone's here with you. Maybe that makes the sleeping less lonely." She settled down beside his throne again. The Emperor could hear her arranging her cleaning supplies, but she was not working anymore. She was just sitting with him. "Would you like to hear about the butterflies?" Elena asked. "Mom told me Earth had millions of them. Little flying flowers, she called them. They started as caterpillars, all crawly and earthbound. But then they wrapped themselves up and went to sleep. And when they woke up, they had wings." She paused. "I think that's the most beautiful story in the universe," she whispered. "Something ugly becoming something wonderful. Something that couldn't fly learning how to dance in the sky." The Emperor lay motionless, but inside his mind, something was breaking. Or maybe something was being born. He could not tell the difference anymore. Elena's voice continued, soft and steady, telling him about butterflies and flowers and all the gentle creatures that had once filled Earth's skies. She spoke like these things still existed somewhere. Like beauty could not really die, even when worlds burned. Hours passed. The three suns moved across the sky. Other servants came and went from distant parts of the palace, but Elena remained, watching over his sleep, protecting his rest, sharing her stories and her drawings in her threadbare blanket. Finally, as afternoon shadows grew long, Elena stood up. "I have to go help Mom now," she said quietly. "But I hope you had good dreams. I hope you saw the butterflies." She moved around his throne one more time, checking that everything was clean and perfect. Then she stopped beside him again. "Thank you for letting me stay," she whispered. "It gets lonely cleaning by myself." This was nice. The Emperor felt the soft blanket being tucked more carefully around his legs. Elena's small hands were gentle and sure, like she had done this many times before. Like caring for others was as natural to her as breathing. "Sweet dreams, Your Majesty," she said. "I'll see you tomorrow." Her footsteps moved away. The great doors opened and closed. Elena was gone. The Emperor lay alone in his throne room, covered by a human child's blanket, and felt something he had not experienced in 3,000 years. Wonder not at some great conquest or perfect strategy. Wonder at the simple fact that Elena existed, that somewhere in his vast, ordered empire, there was a small girl who gave away her only blanket to keep an enemy warm, who saw sadness in the eyes of the being who had destroyed her world, who offered kindness to someone who had shown her none. The Emperor remained motionless for a long time after Elena left, thinking about butterflies and wondering what it might feel like to grow wings. Emperor Zixthal remained perfectly still for another hour after Elena left. The throne room grew darker as the three suns set, but he did not move. Elena's blanket still covered his legs. Her drawing still sat beside his throne. Her words still echoed in his mind. Finally, when true darkness came, He opened his eyes. The crystal walls caught starlight and threw it around the room in cold patterns. Everything looked the same as always. Perfect, ordered, empty. But something had changed. Something inside him that he could not name or understand. The Emperor sat up slowly, Elena's blanket sliding from his legs onto the floor. He looked down at it for a long moment. Such a small thing. Rough cloth that any Vorthik would throw away without thought. But Elena had treasured it enough to give it away. He picked it up carefully, as if it might break. The fabric was softer than he had expected, worn smooth by countless washings and use. He could smell traces of Elena on it. Soap and something sweeter. Something that reminded him of the growing things his people had forgotten. How to love. Beside his throne lay Elena's drawing. The Emperor reached for it with hands that shook slightly. When had his hands last shaken? The picture was crude by artistic standards. Black charcoal on gray cloth, showing simple shapes that barely looked like what they were meant to be. Circles for suns, wavy lines for oceans, stick trees with cloud-like tops. But Elena had drawn it with love. He could see that in every careful line. She had tried to show him beauty, even though her world was gone. Even though he was the one who had taken it away. The Emperor stood and walked to the great windows that showed his empire. 847 worlds spun in the darkness. Billions of beings lived and worked and died at his command. All of it perfectly organized. All of it under his control. But what did any of it matter if there was no joy in it? He activated his personal computer system with a thought. Information flowed into his mind faster than light. He searched the vast databases of his empire, looking for something he had never sought before. Kindness. The computer found examples, but they were rare and always came with conditions. Kindness for profit. Kindness for loyalty. Kindness for power. Calculated gifts given to achieve specific goals. Elena's kindness had no conditions. She had gained nothing by covering him with her blanket. She had risked punishment by staying with him, talking to him, sharing her stories. She had given him her drawing, knowing he might destroy it when he woke. She had been kind, simply because kindness was who she was. The Emperor searched for more data. He accessed files on human psychology that his scientists had compiled after the conquest. The reports were dismissive. Humans were called emotional and irrational. Their tendency to help others was labeled a survival flaw that made them weak. But what if the scientists were wrong? What if human emotions were not weaknesses, but strengths his people had never understood? He thought about Elena's father, who had died fighting an impossible war. Not because he could win, but because he wanted to protect his family. He thought about Myra, who worked 16 hours a day without complaint because she loved her daughter. He thought about Elena herself, who found ways to be happy even in the depths of defeat. These were not the actions of a weak species. These were the actions of creatures with something the Vorthik had lost long ago. Hearts. The Emperor accessed more files. Battle reports from the War for Earth. He had read them before, but only to study tactics and efficiency. Now he looked deeper. Human soldiers had stayed to help wounded friends instead of retreating to safety. They had shared food with prisoners. They had died protecting civilians they did not even know. The Vorthik commanders had reported these actions as proof of human stupidity. But the Emperor was beginning to see them differently. He thought about his own people. Perfect warriors who felt no fear, but also no love. Perfect scientists who solved every problem, but never wondered why the problems mattered. Perfect citizens who obeyed every law, but had no songs to sing while they worked. When was the last time he had heard a Vorthik laugh? When was the last time one of his people had created something just because it was beautiful? When was the last time anyone in his empire had covered a sleeping stranger with their only blanket? Never. The Vorthik had achieved perfection by removing everything that made life worth living. The Emperor walked back to his throne and sat down heavily. Elena's blanket was still in his hands. Such a small thing to carry such a large truth. His empire was dying. Not from war or disease or rebellion. It was dying from the inside, slowly freezing as its people became more perfect and less alive. He had spent 3,000 years building something magnificent and empty, but the humans were different. Conquered and broken and reduced to servants, they still found ways to care for each other. They still made music and art and dreams. They still believed in butterflies and kindness and the possibility that ugly things could grow wings. The Emperor activated his communication system. Captain Vexstar appeared on the screen, standing at attention. "My lord, did the experiment yield useful data?" "Yes," the Emperor said quietly. "More than I expected." "What did the humans do when they thought you were helpless?" The Emperor looked down at Elena's blanket. "They cared for me." Confusion flickered across the captain's face. "My lord?" "Prepare my private files," the Emperor commanded. "I want complete records on every human in the palace. Their histories, their families, their skills. All of it. Are you planning to remove them, my lord? Were they disrespectful?" "No." The Emperor smoothed Elena's blanket across his knees. "I am planning to learn from them." The screen went dark, leaving the Emperor alone with his thoughts and his growing understanding that tomorrow everything would change. But tonight, he sat in his perfect crystal throne room, wrapped in a human child's threadbare blanket, and looked at a drawing of a world he had destroyed. For the first time in centuries, he allowed himself to feel something other than cold satisfaction. He felt grief for what he had taken away, wonder at what he had discovered, and something else, something fragile and new. Hope that perhaps it was not too late to learn about butterflies. Hope that even emperors could grow wings. The Emperor folded Elena's drawing carefully and placed it in his private files, where it would be safe forever. Then he wrapped her blanket around his shoulders and sat back in his throne. For the first time in 3,000 years, Emperor Zixthal smiled. The next morning brought chaos to the Crystal Palace. Emperor Zixthal had not slept. Instead, he had spent the night reading files and making plans that would shock his empire to its core. Elena's blanket still lay across his shoulders like a royal cloak. A drawing sat on his desk beside the most important documents in the galaxy. When Captain Vexstar entered the throne room for the morning briefing, he stopped in confusion. The Emperor looked different. There was something in his eyes that had not been there before. Something warm and dangerous. "My lord," the captain began carefully, "your orders last night were unusual. Were they carried out?" "Yes, but the staff is confused. You summoned the human servants to the Great Hall. All of them. Even the children. They think they are going to be punished." The Emperor stood, Elena's blanket folding around him. "Good. Assemble the High Council as well. Every advisor, every general, every department head. I want them in the Great Hall in 1 hour." "My lord, what are you planning?" "Change," the Emperor said simply. 1 hour later, the Great Hall buzzed with nervous energy. On one side stood the Vorthak elite, hundreds of perfect beings in perfect uniforms, their faces calm but their minds full of questions. On the other side huddled the human servants, frightened and confused, expecting the worst. Elena stood near her mother, small and pale but not crying. Even facing unknown punishment, she held herself with quiet dignity. The Emperor noticed she kept looking around the great hall with wonder, as if seeing beauty even in this moment of fear. The Emperor entered without ceremony. He wore his formal robes, but Elena's blanket was draped over his shoulders for all to see. In his hand, he carried her drawing. The hall fell silent. "Citizens of the Vorthak Empire," the Emperor began, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. Today we begin a new age. He turned to face the human servants directly. You came to us as prisoners of war. We treated you as lesser beings fit only for simple labor. We were wrong. Gasps echoed through the hall. Vorthik did not admit mistakes. The very concept was alien to their culture. Yesterday, I conducted an experiment, the Emperor continued. I wanted to see how humans behave when they think no one is watching. What I discovered has changed everything I thought I knew about strength and wisdom. He held up Elena's drawing. A child gave me this. A picture of the world we destroyed, offered not as accusation, but as gift. She wanted to share beauty with someone she had every reason to hate. The Emperor's eyes found Elena in the crowd. She looked up at him with curiosity instead of fear. Elena, he called. Come forward. Elena's mother tried to stop her, but Elena stepped into the open space between humans and Vorthik. She walked steadily across the polished floor until she stood before the Emperor's throne. Yesterday you covered me with your blanket, the Emperor said, speaking only to her now. Why? Elena tilted her head, thinking. You look cold, she said simply. I am your conqueror. I destroyed your world. I know, Elena replied, but you still looked cold. The Emperor knelt down until he was at Elena's eye level. The great hall held its breath. You gave me your only blanket. What did you hope to gain? Elena's brow furrowed. Gain? What reward did you expect? What did you want in return? Nothing, Elena said, sounding confused by the question. I just wanted you to be warm. The Emperor looked into her eyes and saw truth there. Pure, simple, impossible truth. She had acted out of kindness with no thought of reward. He stood and turned to address the hall again. This child has taught me something our empire has forgotten. We have spent millennia perfecting our bodies and minds, but we have lost our souls. We have become strong in every way except the one that matters most. He activated the holographic display that dominated one wall of the hall. Images appeared. Elena cleaning quietly around his throne, covering him with her blanket, talking to him about butterflies and dreams. Observe, the Emperor commanded. A conquered child caring for her conqueror, offering comfort with no conditions, sharing beauty in the face of loss. This is not weakness. This is a strength we have never understood. Murmurs rippled through the Vorthik side of the hall. Some sounded angry, some confused. A few, the Emperor noted with interest, sounded intrigued. Effective immediately, the Emperor announced. All humans in this empire are granted full citizenship. You will no longer be servants. You will be teachers. The hall erupted. Vorthik voices rose in protest. Human voices rose in disbelief. Only Elena remained quiet, watching the Emperor with those wise, sad eyes. Silence. The Emperor commanded, and the hall obeyed. Elena, he said, I name you the first human Vorthik cultural ambassador. Your job will be to teach my people what you taught me. That strength without compassion is meaningless. That perfection without love is just another form of death. Elena blinked. I don't understand. You will, the Emperor said gently. Your mother will be head of interspecies relations. Together, you will help us learn to be more than perfect. You will help us learn to be alive. He turned back to his advisors, many of whom looked ready to revolt. I know this seems impossible, he told them. For 3,000 years, we have believed emotions were weakness. But look at what our perfect empire has created. Planets full of beings who obey but do not dream. Citizens who serve but do not hope. We have built a galaxy without joy. The Emperor lifted Elena's blanket from his shoulders and wrapped it around her small form. This child lost everything to our war. Her father died fighting us. Her world was destroyed, her people enslaved. And yet, when she found me sleeping, she covered me with her only blanket because she thought I looked cold. He placed his hand gently on Elena's head. I want to build an empire where such kindness is valued, where art and music and dreams matter as much as laws and efficiency, where beings care for each other not because they must, but because they choose to. The Emperor looked out over the assembled crowds, Vorthok and human, conqueror and conquered, perfect and imperfect. I call this the Elena Protocol. From today forward, every school in our empire will teach the principles she showed me: compassion, empathy, the courage to care for others even when they do not deserve it. Elena tugged on the Emperor's robes. He bent down to hear her whisper. "What about the butterflies?" she asked quietly. The Emperor smiled, the first real smile his court had ever seen from him. "Yes," he said loud enough for all to hear. "We will also learn about butterflies, about things that start earthbound and learn to fly, about transformation and hope and the beauty of becoming something new." He stood and addressed the hall one final time. Our empire was built on conquest. From today forward, it will be built on something stronger. It will be built on the revolutionary idea that every being in the galaxy deserves kindness. That love is not weakness, but the greatest power in the universe. The Emperor took Elena's hand and led her to a small throne that had been prepared beside his own. "Welcome to the new age," he declared. "May we all learn to grow wings." As Elena climbed onto her throne, still wrapped in her threadbare blanket, she began to hum that same gentle tune from Earth. Soon, other human voices joined her. Then, to everyone's amazement, some of the Vorthok began to hum along, for the first time in 3,000 years. The Crystal Palace filled with music. Outside, 847 worlds continued to spin in their orbits. But everything was different now. The galaxy's greatest empire had learned a new kind of strength. The kind that came from an 8-year-old girl who shared her blanket with someone who needed it. The kind that believed ugly things could grow wings. The kind that knew the most powerful force in the universe was not conquest or perfection, but the simple decision to care for someone else. Elena's revolution had begun.